Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Unlocking Rural Potential, Why Investment Attraction Readiness is a Crucial Step for Economic Leaders. I'm Alexander Lavoie, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we begin, we acknowledge that our Brandon office is located on Treaty 2 lands, the traditional homelands of the Dakota, Anishinaabe, Oji-Cree, Cree, Dene, and Métis people. We work extensively throughout Manitoba in the lands of Treaties 1 through 4 and the southern portion of Treaty 5. RMED respects the treaties made on these lands where we will work together. We commit to reconciliation along the path to economic prosperity. Just a few housekeeping items. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. If you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message in the chat and someone will assist you promptly. If you get disconnected, please use your initial link to log back in if possible. And we encourage you to use the chat feature or any questions you have for our panelists. We'll address these during our Q&A session. So with that being done, I am now pleased to introduce our distinguished panel of experts. Each brings a wealth of experience and unique insights to our discussion today. I'd like to introduce you to Osman Naqvi, currently serving as the Regional Advisor for the Prairies at Invest in Canada. Osman works with global Fortune 500 and 1000 companies to advance their innovation and global expansion projects. His experience includes advising Canada's Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food on domestic and international agriculture policy. Osman holds various accolades and serves on several national and international boards and committees, such as the Global Affairs Can-Export Board, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Value Added Agriculture Committee, that's a mouthful, and the Invest in Canada Committee on Food and Beverage. In addition, you can probably find some links and hear him speaking on the international stage and with TEDx. Welcome, Osman. Our next panelist is Erica Magder. As the Executive Vice President of Global Sales at Research FDI, Erica brings 20 years of experience in economic and business development to her role. She manages a portfolio of business intelligence, training lead generation, and data services for Research FDI's international clients. Erica's expertise spans working with Fortune 500 companies and fast-growing businesses to support their international growth initiatives. At RMED, we have been incredibly lucky to be working with Erica and the capabilities at Research FDI. Welcome, Erica. And saving the best for last, we have our Manitoban own Becky Chinfloney. So Becky is the Executive Director of Community Futures Greenstone. And Becky is passionate advocate for economic growth in Northern Manitoba. Her diverse experience includes crafting investment strategies through the Look North Action Plan, inspiring workforce innovation as chair of University College of the North, and launching the region's first co-working space. Hi, Becky. Excellent. So you should have had a chance to answer the questions, and we'll go into our main discussion. So we have a series of questions to explore with our panelists. Our first topic will focus on the concept of investment attraction readiness. And this is a crucial starting point for our discussion today. So the first question is, what does investment attraction readiness mean for rural communities?
Sorry, Alexander, do you want me to start, or are you going to let us know, or we should just jump in?
Oh, you can jump.
Okay,
Whoever has
cool.
an answer ready.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, I think one of the things I really love about this topic, and we've done training in quite a few rural areas. We did some training in Saskatchewan this year, and we're doing some right now in Atlantic provinces. And one of the things that we hear a lot from communities is that there's not always a collaboration internally with the communities themselves. So the first step to me is actually making sure that all the stakeholders in the community are aligned to bring in new investors. So that means like the mayor, the city managers, like all the people that are going to get involved in that FDI attraction piece or the investment attraction piece really need to be aligned first. And the communities that do that well tend to be the ones that are going to get those projects because they're easy to work with. When the province has projects or Invest in Canada has projects to bring, if they see that there's reticence in the community itself, then it's going to make it difficult to bring those projects in.
Okay, great answer. Osmond,
Thanks.
did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Alexander, first of all, for hosting us. You guys, the work Armed does is absolutely phenomenal, and we had a great opportunity to sit down with your CEO recently, and there's always exciting work that Armed is doing. When it relates to this question, there are a handful of points that come to mind when it comes to investment. What does investment readiness mean for rural communities? The first is it's the ability to service investment interests at the turn of a key. At Invest in Canada, we're always entertaining investments, either $50 million or above. It could be in the hundreds of millions, it could be in the billions of dollars. Regardless the size of the opportunity, there's usually a small window to respond to their deadlines. And when you're investment ready, you're able to compete. The second would be, it means greater economic diversification. For a long time, we're seeing investments go to urban centers, but increasingly as more rural communities become investment ready, they're getting to compete on the world stage. And we're seeing tons of success stories coming out of rural communities all throughout the prairies, such as Winkler, Manitoba, Portage, Manitoba, Bethune, Saskatchewan, for instance. And then the next point I would dive into is the ability to diversify and build upon your existing ecosystem. When you're investment ready, you can identify where the gaps might exist and where you might need the introduction of a new player to build out that ecosystem. Hypothetically, let's say you have a potash mine in your area. You might naturally want to work with the provincial and federal government to help attract a processor. And then that naturally means that you are able to build out your supply chain. It also means building out your indirect economic development. So let's go back to that example we previously discussed, where you have that that potash mine. We've now collectively got that processor in place. So now that processor needs to bring their goods to market. So that means a trucking company might need to be introduced, and they'll bring that economic development to your region. Now that trucking company and that processing plant have employees that need to live, work, and play in your municipality. So naturally, some of them might like Italian food, some of them might like Indian food. So you'll get the benefit of some restaurants being created in your local community. And the last 2 points I would say that come to mind are it also means potential Indigenous engagement. It's an opportunity for reconciliation. Oftentimes when you're investment ready and you're bringing in investors, they'll work with the Indigenous communities in the region to discuss land negotiations, potentially go into joint venture agreements and share equity. It could also mean procurement opportunities from Indigenous companies and of course, labor and employment opportunities. And then finally, it can mean greater employment and resident retention. Many rural communities across Manitoba are basically the closest thing to heaven, perhaps. It's absolutely beautiful, it's absolutely stunning. But there might not be the economic opportunity for them to stay, so they feel the need to perhaps move into larger urban centers. If we work together to make rural communities investment ready and bring in these economic opportunities, it allows them the opportunity to stay in these beautiful places.
When I think about investment attraction in rural communities, I think it really comes down to starting with a solid foundation is key to success. So communities need to understand their readiness to attract and retain the investment. And so that starts with your real basics of your economic development strategy. So I'm representing today the Economic Developers Association of Manitoba. I just wanted to bring to your attention a training program that we do offer. We have a certification called Community Edge. And so it does take practitioners, your senior officials, like Erica mentioned, your city managers as leaders that you need to bring in early. This program actually takes you through the early stages of, understanding what community economic development is, how you start to bring together the pieces of information that you need to build a solid plan. And then it also helps you to build that strategy and understand the stakeholders around it as well. So I just want to give a shout out and a little plug for EDAM, Economic Developers Association of Manitoba, and our Community Edge program and how that can help, especially smaller communities, rural communities, and regional entities to move investment readiness forward by moving those foundational pieces forward in their own communities.
That's an excellent point. RMED is also, I guess, supported taking the Community Edge program. It really is fantastic. The majority of our staff have, just so that we can talk on behalf and support that program. So thanks for the answers, and we'll move on to a discussion on how rural communities can create compelling investment propositions. So looking at that opportunity, I think I'll tap Osman on the shoulder to answer this one first. But what elements make a compelling investment proposition for rural areas?
Thanks, Alexander. This is one of my favorite topics. Part of being investment ready is, of course, making sure that you have your investment proposition in place. Now, to showcase an enticing investment proposition, it basically means to have all the foundational pieces in place for an investor to look at your region favorably. So what exactly does that consist of? You're probably wondering, Osman. Well, what are you talking about over there? I would say it touches on a few pieces. It means to have your zoning in place. And whether or not it is zoned properly for industrial development isn't necessarily important, but do you have the processes in place to quickly transition that zoning so that it could meet the deadlines of the client? Next would be fast approval processes. Having an NDA in place, many times one will need to be created or signed to be able to play. A land depository options, like having knowing what is even available for them to take hold of, whether that's land owned municipally or by private investors in the local area. Serviceability, how much water, wastewater, electricity could be used, the incentives, because we're dealing with very large scale transformational incentives. Sometimes municipalities might need to consider one-off incentives. You are competing against the world after all. And many of these companies might be bringing in dozens or hundreds or thousands of employees, and it might be worth considering what your one-off incentives might be. Then your knowledge of key sectors and your existing ecosystem, of course. Building out a strong economic development website. And this is a topic now gearing up more and more interest as we talk to investors. In recent history, almost 99% of large-scale investors are caring about the quality of life piece. They're bringing in new employees, and they want to know how their new employees will live, work, and play in your region. Luckily for rural Manitoba, this should be a very easy ask, as it is a beautiful and affordable place to set up and live. To build upon that, when you're talking about building out an investment proposition, one of the key components is to have a value proposition. You're the same way that the federal government, the provincial government are going to perhaps put together a deck or a pitch of why Canada is great, why the province is great. Your municipality should have a value proposition as well of why that region is great. Now, I'm happy to share with our friends on the line here. What are some components that could be included in that value proposition? Some points could include your municipal overview, the location. Unfortunately, many people on the world stage only know where Toronto might be. So we need to educate them about some of these beautiful places spread across Manitoba. Then is the economic development ecosystem for the region, your business advantages, the municipal incentives that might be unique to that specific investor, the priority sector that they want to invest in, transportation from your region, energy, water, wastewater, labor and immigration, education, and the talent pipeline that might be fed into their labor force, the standard of living, tourism, the site option that they'll be considering, the details around it, some anchor investments that might have previously been made in your municipality. And finally, you could wrap up your pitch with a contact us page, of course. Thanks, Alexander.
Excellent. I like how you mentioned like quality of life and living in rural Manitoba. And for those of you joining us today from Manitoba, maybe we won't mention that today is December 12th and it's in the -40s with the wind chills. So we'll leave that out of the value prop. Erica, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, so I was taking notes. Hope everyone was taking notes as Osmond was talking. That was a great overview. Thank you. It is actually, all I wanted to say is that we are doing a training session in a couple of weeks with the Rural Manitoba group, and we have an entire module that's based on how to develop your value proposition. So I was taking notes to make sure we didn't miss anything, but I think we have everything that you mentioned covered in our training. So just kind of walking through the steps that Osmond mentioned. One thing I would just sort of, it might have seemed overwhelming, all the things that Osmond mentioned. So what I would just say is that if you don't have a specific investor coming today, maybe just work on that general investor value proposition for your region with those things that could be reused. And then the other things that he mentioned, such as like site options, anchor investments, those are things that you could build when you do get those investors coming in. But having those general information pieces ready to go will help, and it's going to save a ton of time when you do get that project in. So you have time to build that up. The talent pipeline is really important. And I think the only thing that I had on my notes that maybe he didn't mention was just the you mentioned it in the last answer, but just like making sure that that you can demonstrate the market demand and a return on investment from the investment that is coming into your region. So just what is the ecosystem? What's the supply chain? How is that investor going to then make their money back by investing in your region?
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the more important factors I heard was said that was the sector focused. So making sure you identify a few industries that would really fit within the ecosystem that your community has.
Yeah, and then we typically actually suggest that communities have a value proposition per sector. So it's just a general one that explains the location. And you were point on that. Like not everyone knows even where Toronto is. So making sure that you know who you're communicating with and you explain your region, where it's located based on things that people will understand, but also having that value proposition per sector. And then just not picking too many sectors. So it is a lot of information to do. So we encourage our clients to really focus on where they have a unique value proposition and not, try to do 10 sectors and, that you probably don't have 10 sectors where you are unique. So focus on the 1 or 2 subsectors where you really have a unique value proposition and build that up. It doesn't mean that you can't be reactive to other opportunities that come in potentially adjacent sectors. But when you're doing your proactive work, you want to really focus on those 1 or 2 key sectors where you have that unique value proposition.
Excellent. Just a little bit of a follow-up to that, and it might be putting you on the spot and you can choose to answer or not, but do any of you have examples of successful investment propositions from your experience?
Yeah, so Becky mentioned Portage La Prairie. I think that's actually an example we give in our training. I think it's a great community. They have a great website. They have a lot of information, and I believe they've won quite a few projects because of that. Osmond, would you agree? I think you mentioned, was it Becky or Osmond that mentioned them in there? Yeah.
I'm all on board. I think we're probably telepathically connected because that points that you brought up about being focused on key sectors last time is spot on. We always encourage municipalities to do that. And I was thinking of Portage La Prairie as well. If I didn't mention it before, definitely thinking about them. They do have strong relationships with their with economic development leaders throughout the province. Great ties with their economic development team, has great ties with their general municipal leadership to make sure that processes are streamlined. Like you said, that website is absolutely phenomenal. It definitely addresses the needs of investors, and they have maintained great relationships with the provincial and federal government, and they truly do understand that that ability to build out the value proposition.
So that's some high praise for Portage La Prairie. Way to go. So one of the pieces to it is like overcoming challenges in investment attraction. So we've addressed the readiness factor and the base layer that you kind of need to start thinking about and developing. But let's address some of the hurdles that rural communities often face in the process. So from your perspective, what are some common challenges rural communities face in attracting investment? And I mean, you can mention some of the aforementioned ones in the previous question.
So I live in Flin Flon, Manitoba, and for anybody that doesn't know, Flin Flon lost our largest industry, our largest employer 2 years ago with the closure of our local mine. So we've gone through a very interesting time in our stages of economic development and how we react and respond. And so one of the common mistakes that I've seen sort of generally is the idea of chasing smokestacks and chasing mega projects before you really understand and focus on your community's unique value proposition, competitive advantage, or assets, right? So I always say start from what's strong, not what's wrong. So again, if you're not located next to a lake, you're probably not going to have a fishing industry, right? If you're not located where there's ore, you're not going to have a mining industry. So you want to again really focus on what those competitive advantages are for your region. So often when we ask municipal leaders, what kind of investment do you want to see? Well, any kind of investment would be great. That's not necessarily the case, right? You have limited resources, you have limited energy, you have limited everything. And so you want to focus in on the pieces that where your community A can actually have good sustainable development and development that aligns with your community's vision. So again, that's part of that livability piece, right? So yeah, maybe a nuclear reactor facility would bring a lot of jobs, a lot of prosperity to an area, but what are some of the trade-offs to that? And so I think it's important to understand that. And then again, I think two common challenges, and again, I don't think there's any community where these are unique, but major infrastructure gaps that we're seeing, particularly in municipalities, that's going to affect how we attract investment across our regions. And then housing shortages, right? A real hot topic for today. You know, in any table we sit at, there's lots of conversations about housing. And again, it's a piece that affects the way we talk about attracting investment, the way that we focus on how we grow and diversify our communities.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and like certainly multifaceted. So a lot of those pieces are interconnected and kind of rely on each other. It's the always the chicken and the egg. Were there any other comments?
I could add a few points. I think it's an excellent question, Alexander, because if you don't pinpoint what the challenges are, how are you going to know what to solve, right? So a few challenges that come to mind are some municipalities might feel like they want to run before they could walk. It goes back to our previous question about needing the need to build out that foundation. Get your zoning in place, your land in place, water, wastewater in place, building out that value proposition. Next would be to build on Becky's point, getting focused on what you want to attract. And Erica mentioned this in the last question. You may not want to work on attracting 20 different sectors. Maybe you focus on 3 to 4 sectors or less. Some municipalities even have one sector of focus, for instance. Knowing your ecosystem, what's already in play, that might not already be knowledge some municipalities might not have. And then there seems to be a lack of understanding of where municipalities might even fit into the overall investment journey. So understanding that, working with the province and the federal government to see where they may be best utilized. Timing is another big challenge. A lot of these investors come with very tight deadlines, sometimes with RFIs, which are requests for information documents that need to be filled out within 24 or 48 hours. So unfortunately, if some of these tight deadlines can't be met, then you can't be considered. And then there's the last challenge I would point out is an interesting one, because many rural municipalities feel like workforce development might be an issue. Well, we're seeing increasingly that, especially with the investors that we're working with, 50 million or above, technology is playing a large role and automation is playing a large role. So they don't necessarily need to be in major urban centers to attract an insane number of employees. The employment and and labor availability in these rural communities can very well meet these investors' needs that go into the billions of dollars.
Incredible. So you both of you have framed that question or those answers perfectly, because it led into our next question, which was how can economic leaders overcome these challenges to create a more attractive investment environment? So I know Becky kind of gave the challenge and gave the solution at the same time. So if one of you had a couple extra comments on that.
I could build upon some of the challenges I mentioned. To address those, municipalities should know that they're not alone. They have the ability to, municipalities and economic development organizations, of course, need to know that they're not alone. They could lean on the provincial government and the federal government to identify gaps that may exist and work collectively to address those. They could apply to foundation building programs such as GAC's Can Export program, work with Prairies Can. Prairies Can I work with on a very regular basis, and they have very close ties with rural communities throughout the prairies. And it's a phenomenal partner to lean on and learn from. Next would be to build strong partnerships with the economic development ecosystem. We all can learn from one another. And then finally, I would say advocate. And this is one piece that gets left out sometimes from rural municipalities. It's advocate to the other levels of government, and even perhaps Hydro Manitoba, for instance. you have a lot to offer, but you should allow it to shine.
Great piece. Okay, just giving the other two a chance. You want to say anything?
I would just say that like early collaboration and partnerships is crucial, right? So we've talked a little bit about Portage Regional Economic Development. And I think that was one of their keys to success in their region, was that early collaboration, partnerships, and then the recognition that what's good for one part of the region is good for the rest of the region. And I do really think that that's been sort of the secret sauce to what we're seeing that's happening in Portage la Prairie with a number of developments. And that includes those partners that Osmond mentioned, the provincial and federal governments coming alongside some of those big projects.
Yeah. And just on that piece for collaboration and looking to the ecosystem partners and kind of familiarizing yourself with that. Another little plug-in is to join the EDAM membership. So really great group of people, lots of experience within that group. So if you're interested, take a look, and we'll send out information after on some of the resources that have been mentioned today. Just a quick reminder while we're going through, if you do have any questions, just put them into the chat function. We'll take a look at them as we go through, but you also have a chance to raise your hand at the end here. So in the spirit of preparation, I just wanted to briefly touch on the Investment Attraction Readiness Program that RMED is offering in January. And direct these next questions specifically to our panelists from Research FDI and EDAM, with whom we've collaborated on this program fantastically, I might add. So Erica, maybe we'll start with you. And I know you've done this training with Invest Alberta and Edmonton Global, and I think you've done some short versions of it at CEDA. So what should economic leaders expect from the Investment Attraction Readiness Program?
Yes, thank you, Alexander. So absolutely, we have been working with a couple of communities across Canada and the United States already on this program, and it's always going to be tailored as well to the communities that we work with. So we try to make sure that we're bringing case studies and examples and practical things that the community members can use after the training and during the training. So the purpose of the program is we're going to be going through 8 critical modules, 1 module per session. Each session is going to be around 2 to 3 hours. And we're going to start from the beginning of, what investment attraction is, the fundamentals, just looking at key drivers, so for people who maybe are new to the economic development field, they'll get an understanding, but we'll also provide some insights in terms of global trends, what we're seeing, and how rural communities specifically can take advantage of those trends. We'll also go into some practical modules where we talk about how to target investors. So now that you know what develop your criteria for what would be a good target. So really taking you through some around how to do lead generation. So how to do outreach by email, just the foundations again about how to write a good email. What are the techniques that we use as a lead generation firm that ensure that our messages get seen, how to reach out to people on social media, how to use LinkedIn effectively. So really some of those practical elements that people need to know. And then we're going to go through some of those things I mentioned before about value proposition development, how to build a value proposition, how to do investment facilitation. So a lot of that is how to host a site visit, how to make sure that you're ready for a site visit, how to make sure that you can complete those RFIs and RFPs that Osmond mentioned. So taking through that, and then finally looking at aftercare and expansion. So how to work with existing businesses that already are in your community. I did want to also mention that we have a workbook that we've been working on with you as well, so that everyone will have that workbook. And as we go through the modules, they'll be able to actually do some of those exercises as their community. So developing your SWOT analysis, making sure that you are ready to present your value proposition. So obviously we can't work, unfortunately, with every 40 community to do that for them, but the goal is to give you time during the session and after the sessions to actually fill in the workbook, so you have some practical information at the end of the 8 sessions.
Excellent. And Becky, you've been privy to seeing the content and reviewing it with us, and any other thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I've been reviewing some of the content, and it's a really exciting program. I want to thank Ahmed for bringing that to Manitoba. I also participated in the shorter version of the program with Erica in Saskatoon back in the spring. There's a lot of value here. I think the important pieces are, again, the community needs to understand their readiness first. So to go through a little bit of that process to understand like what stage you're at, and who's involved and who you can get around a strategy around investment readiness. And as has already been mentioned, and Erica mentioned again, that competitive advantage, that unique value proposition. So really honing in on a couple of industries, a couple of targeted sectors that would make sense for your region, and also for the communities, again, long-term vision and strategies.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so maybe more of the preparatory question. Maybe we can talk a little bit about community edge again, but how can communities best prepare to participate in the program to kind of maximize those benefits? And we can mention having more than one attend, or like more of a like kind of a team building exercise even.
That was what I was going to say. Obviously, I think the more people from a community that attend, the better the buy-in will be afterwards. And I find, the people that come and they're one person in, let's say a place of 5 or 10 people working on this, it's hard to then go back and educate on everything you just spent, 8 weeks learning. And so obviously, like, communities that are really eager and can get more than one person on the table, I think is super helpful. And then also, talking to adjacent communities. And so one of the things that came out of some of the training we did in Saskatoon is that, some of the communities could work together. And so, and I like to give, and I'll give a plug to Becky here with Invest FDC. So it's actually a regional group that came together to, and it crosses Manitoba and Saskatchewan. It's 3 communities that actually work together. They developed a website, and they have, a great example of how communities can work together. So it's Flin Flon, Crichton, and Denair Beach. And I think as much as communities think that they can kind of do it on their own, I think that a lot of smaller communities really benefit from regional grouping. So what is a region, even if you're not that close geographically, but you have similar sectors and similar things that you're looking to attract, if you can bring together 4 or 5 communities that are looking to attract the same thing, then that also increases your resources. So that's something to maybe consider as well for the training.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Erica mentioned, that regionality is crucial, especially when we're talking about rural Manitoba. We're talking about a lot of smaller communities. And so the ability, again, if there's several people from the same region that can work together on some of these strategies, that's an amazing opportunity to build those partnerships and to start that collaboration so that you are ready to talk to investors. And again, I think that a great way to get ready to participate in this training is to join EDAM, become a member of the Economic Developers Association of Manitoba, and to look at that community edge training and those modules, and in building those fundamentals, understanding your readiness. So because foreign direct investment, industrial investment is, one component of a very healthy, robust economic development program.
It's actually, well, it's just been like fantastic working with Research FDI and EDM on this project and this program. Um, just for those who don't know, if you do have an EDAM membership, there's a significant discount for the Investment Attraction Readiness Program. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll change course a little bit and looking towards the future and opportunities that that are out there. So as we look ahead, it's important to consider emerging trends in rural investment. And I guess the question for the panel is, what future trends do you see in rural investment attraction? Maybe we could start with Osman.
Thanks, Alexander. This is a really exciting question, especially in FDI, because we're seeing a lot of these future trends rolling out in real time and only gaining momentum. Some of which are companies are seeking to be close to source. This is great news for rural municipalities because it means being close to source to agriculture, natural resources, and even a lot of advanced manufacturing then wants to have a lean supply chain. So that might mean setting up in a rural municipality as well. We're seeing larger cities are getting expensive. There's a focus of quality of life for their employees. There might be energy availability difficulties in larger urban centers around the globe. There's not enough land in large urban centers or very expensive land. And for all these reasons, rural municipalities and rural Manitoba is becoming increasingly enticing. And over the last 5 years, we've seen an exponential growth of rural municipalities being considered for large-scale investments. And there's a lot of the rural municipalities who have bought into the idea of becoming investment ready and joining the dance with the provincial government and the federal government working hand in hand. So it's never been a better time for Manitoba and various municipalities all throughout it. It's really their time in the sun right now.
Sorry, I wanted to unmute, but I lost my button for a second. Yeah, and I agree with everything Osman says. One of the things I wanted to mention is just making sure to in order to capitalize on those opportunities, making sure you have the infrastructure and services ready. So 10, 15, 20 years ago, rural cities didn't have maybe broadband, internet, all that type of connectivity. So now that's an advantage, obviously, that cities have that. So making sure your city has those basic infrastructure that they need and that it's available in the land that you want to make accessible to investors is going to be really important and helpful. And then also sustainable. I know this is a question we may be going to talk about a little later, but there's a huge interest right now in sustainable investment. And so that's also something where I think rural communities can take advantage of renewable energy projects, ag tech projects. And that's a very big trend that we're seeing globally. And, I think there's a lot of examples in Canada where these projects are coming to Canada. One that I wanted to highlight is a group called Simply Blue Group. It's a huge company out of Ireland, and they are creating a very large renewable energy sort of a renewable energy park in eastern Nova Scotia. And so if you look up Simply Blue Group project in Canada, you can take a look at them. And it's all about developing sustainable aviation fuel for the aviation market. And it's a really interesting, project, a very large investment. And it's something that is kind of unique to Canada, where we have access to so many resources, and it's using solar, wind farms, the water resources that are available in Nova Scotia. So looking at the resources that are available in your community from a natural resource perspective, this is like, new in economic development. It's old for everybody else, but natural resources are becoming popular and cool again. So trying to see how you can use your natural resources to your advantage.
I like that. It's making a comeback, like vinyl.
Yeah, mining is cool all of a sudden, right? So you got to get
Yay.
on the bandwagon for sure. So
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention on future trends, I know Osman spoke really eloquently about this earlier, but Indigenous, engagement, participation, ownership in projects is crucial. And so we know that, different regions handle this a bit differently. We know that there are certain rules around duty to consult and pieces like that. But we know that that's a really, really big piece. I know for Northern Manitoba particularly, like 80% of our population is Indigenous, and that population's growing 3 times faster than the rest of our population. So when we talk about workforce, that's a stat that we need to keep in our minds as we talk to investors. So I think understanding your Indigenous partnerships, the communities around you, um, and really engaging them in your economic development strategies and as you move forward. The other one I want to mention is educational institutions. So in my introduction, it was mentioned that, I served as president of a university. And I think if you have an educational institution in your region, you should be talking to them. They can be a huge advocate, a great partner. They can help you not only with some of your data and building these profiles, but they can also, have a huge impact on workforce, on training programs. So those are two pieces that I think all communities should really be considering as fundamental pieces of economic development strategies. Indigenous participation and then educational institutions that might be within your region.
Thanks, Becky. And Becky's always ahead of me, just like one step ahead, because it always leads into the next question on how can rural communities kind of position themselves to take advantage of some of those emerging opportunities. So again, Becky, you nailed it. Were there any other comments, maybe from Osman or Erica?
For sure. Of course, Becky did an excellent job mentioning some very important pieces that municipalities and uh, rural municipalities in particular could utilize. For myself, there's 3 pillars that probably come to mind. The first would be to build that strong foundation that we discussed earlier about investment readiness and walking before we run. The next would be to build those relationships. Coming back to what Becky was mentioning with your post-secondary institutions, with your Indigenous communities, in more so also with your provincial government and your federal government. And then lastly, the third pillar would be to start in your own backyard. Know your local businesses and identify if they need reinvestment or they're seeking external investors. There might be some excitement to grab a company from abroad and bring them into your region, but many times the best FDI investment might be a foreign-owned entity that's looking to just do a reinvestment into your community. They also are reporting back to a headquarters of some sort in another country, and they often want a bigger piece of the pie. So it's a win-win situation working hand in hand to meet their objectives.
and then I'll just put a plug for making sure that you have a sector strategy developed for your high growth industries. So talking about those trends, talking about those industries, and making sure that you have a strategy to go after them.
Yeah. Well, fantastic points for all. We are getting to the end of the hour, so I will open it up to some Q&A from the participants here today. I don't see anything in the chat just yet, but I'll give one moment for anybody to raise a hand if they have any pressing questions. Okay, excellent. So I guess I'll just give a huge shout out and huge thank you for joining us today for the insightful discussion. Oh. Okay, we have a question from Sherilyn, sorry. I'm wondering about info resources. Does anybody have a clear investment readiness checklist to share? Erica, maybe I'll pass that to you.
I was going to say, I think it's in our workbook that we created, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, we do have one, and I can make sure that Alexander sends it to you if he has your contact information for those that are not participating in the training session, which I hope you all do. But we do have something we can share. I'm sure Osmond might have something as well, right? Or yeah.
Yeah, a great point, Erica. Yes, if anyone wants to pick my brain, discuss the checklist, always available.
Okay.
The program that RMED's setting forth it sounds very exciting, and I'm sure they'll be discussing some of those essential components as well through that program.
Yeah, and Sherilyn just had a quick follow-up on resources and supports that show regional, provincial, and federal level CED sources. And I think if we had that, we wouldn't have to have this webinar today, but I always find it difficult. Yeah, go ahead.
I would put a plug in for your local community futures office. So those folks tend to have a pretty good read on the ecosystem, what kind of programs and supports are available, and they might even actually have names and phone numbers for humans behind some of those programs. So yeah, reach out to your community futures office as well for some of those resources.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned a human on the other end of the phone, because I can't believe we got through this entire thing and didn't mention AI once. So congratulations to all of us. With that being said, so we are near the end of the hour. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you found that session, the session, valuable, and that you're leaving with some new ideas and strategies to implement in your communities. Or even personally for professional development reasons. And just a few quick reminders. You can find more resources, including our event calendar and tools, on our website at rmedcorp.ca. Find more information on the Investment Attraction Readiness Program. We will be sending out an email after the session just with some of the resources that were mentioned today. So thank you for the question on the resources. Don't forget to check out our upcoming webinar featuring Jody Parmer from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That's on January 20th, and we'll explore delivering tangible outcomes for Manitoba. If you have any further questions or need assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to the RMED team. We'll happily connect you. And again, thank you to our fantastic panelists, Osmond, Erica, Becky, for sharing your expertise. Thank you all who joined us today for your participation. And before we leave, we do ask that you fill out the following Zoom questions just to help us with some feedback. And again, once that's done, then I hope you have a great warm day if you're from Manitoba. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alexander.
Thanks for